Welcome back to Haunt Narratives. It's our Halloween week special, and we're diving deep into Camp Crystal Lake. Tonight we're talking about the birth of a horror icon, Jason Voorhees, and how the Friday the 13th franchise slashed its way into our collective nightmares.
You know, it's chilling how Jason's story began, not as the hulking killer we all know, but like as a whisper, like a fleeting nightmare right at the edge of our vision.
Okay, yeah, you've got my attention. Most people just think of Jason with a hockey mask and the machete, but his journey is a lot more twisted than that. Right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. In the very first Friday the 13th, the 1980 film, Jason, he wasn't even the main attraction.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The film focuses on these camp counselors who are being stalked and murdered, and the killer's identity is a mystery for most of the film, shrouded in mystery.
Right.
But the audience, they eventually discover that it's Pamela Voorhees, Jason's vengeful mother.
Oh, wow. Driven mad by grief over her son's drowning years earlier.
Precisely. She blames the counselors, for not paying attention and letting her son die. It's a chilling portrayal of grief twisted into rage and this thirst for revenge.
So where does Jason fit into all of this? I mean, was he even in the first film?
He was, but not in the way you might expect. You see, he is saved for the final moments of the film. Like a shocking dreamlike twist that leaves the audience like gasping. The final girl, Alice, she thinks she's safe. She's drifting in a canoe out on the lake, and then suddenly, young Jason, he bursts from the water, grabbing her, pulling her down into those murky depths.
Oh, I've heard about that scene. It's one of those, iconic horror moments that just stick with you long after the movie's over.
It's a masterclass in suspense, building suspense and delivering a final, unforgettable scare. And to make it even more unsettling, they covered the young Jason in mud.
Oh.
Giving him like this slimy, almost otherworldly appearance really amps up the feeling of a nightmare brought to life.
That image of him rising from the lake covered in mud. Yeah, it's enough to make anyone think twice about swimming in dark water. But it was all a dream, right?
Yes. Alice wakes up in a hospital bed, the nightmare fading away. But that brief glimpse of Jason, his shocking appearance, it was all it took to plant the seed of something truly terrifying.
It's amazing how such a short appearance, could have such a lasting impact. It's like that moment. Like that moment birthed a monster, both literally and figuratively.
That's a great way to put it. And it's in the sequel, Friday the 13th, Part 2, released just the next year, that Jason takes center stage, stepping out of the shadows into the role of the primary antagonist.
So he goes from a dreamlike apparition to a full-fledged slasher? That's quite a leap.
It is. But his look in Part 2 is surprisingly different from that hulking, hockey-masked figure we all associate with Jason today.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What did he look like in this early stage of his slasher career?
Imagine a burlap sack pulled over his head, hiding his face. He had long, scraggly red hair and a beard, giving him this backwoods, almost feral appearance. Oh. Some have compared it to a demented farmer look.
Interesting. It sounds like they were still experimenting with his appearance,
Yeah.
Trying to find that perfect blend of creepy and terrifying.
Exactly. They wanted to tap into those primal fears, the sense of danger lurking in the isolated woods. And the burlap sack, it obscures his face, It adds an element of mystery, makes him seem even more inhuman.
So how did they handle the physical portrayal of Jason in Part 2? Was it one actor who brought him to life?
It actually took two actors to fully embody Jason in this film. Warrington Gillette played the unmasked Jason in the final scene, but for, the majority of the film, the stalking, the killing, that was all Steve Daskowitz.
Oh, okay.
He was a stuntman, so he brought, physicality, agility to the role that really, enhanced that sense of menace.
Yeah. It's amazing how much thought and detail went into creating Jason, even in those early films.
They were already laying the groundwork for a horror icon, carefully crafting his look, his movements, and that sense of dread that he inspired.
So if Jason didn't start with the hockey mask, when did that iconic piece of his look enter the picture?
That didn't happen until Friday the 13th, Part 3, released in 1982. And believe it or not, the hockey mask's arrival was a bit of an accident, a happy accident, that would forever change the face of horror.
Happy accident. That sounds intriguing. Tell me more about this twist of fate.
So during a lighting test for Part 3, the director, Steve Miner, wanted to, try something different, to cover Jason's face. And one of the crew members, a hockey enthusiast, just happened to have a Detroit Red Wings goalie mask on hand.
Oh, wow.
They decided to see how it looked on Jason, and Miner instantly loved it.
Wow. It's amazing how sometimes the most iconic elements of a character come about through pure chance. But I'm guessing it wasn't as simple as just slapping a hockey mask on Jason and calling it a day, right?
You're right. The original mask was too small for the actor's head, so they had to enlarge it and modify it to fit properly. And they needed to make sure it looked appropriately menacing on screen. They even went so far as to create 2 separate prosthetic masks, specifically for the unmasking scenes. You know, talk about dedication to detail.
That's incredible. It seems like a lot of work for just a few seconds of screen time. But those unmasking scenes,
yeah,
you know, they're often the most memorable and terrifying parts of the films.
Absolutely. They build anticipation and dread, making the audience crave that glimpse of the monster's true face, even though it's a sight that will likely haunt their nightmares.
So the hockey mask was a game changer for Jason's look. But what about his overall, physical presence? Did that evolve along with the mask?
Definitely. In the early films, he was, leaner, more agile, almost like a predator stalking his prey. But by Friday the 13th, Part 4, the final chapter, 1984, Jason had transformed into that imposing figure that we're most familiar with today. Taller, more muscular, his bald head, adding to that sense of brutality.
Like they were slowly refining his image.
Yeah.
Making him more and more intimidating with each film.
Exactly. And a lot of credit for that evolution goes to these special effects artists. Tom Savini, he brought this, visceral realism to Jason's look in Part 4, creating a version that many fans consider to be like the definitive human Jason before, he took on those supernatural qualities in later films.
So Part 4 was like a turning point, visually solidifying Jason as the hulking, unstoppable force we know and fear. But wasn't that supposed to be the final chapter? How did Jason come back from that?
That's where things get really interesting.
I'm on the edge of my seat. This is what I love about Haunt Narratives.
Yeah.
These unexpected twists and turns in the stories behind our favorite horror icons.
And Jason's journey is full of them. You see, even though Part 4 was marketed as the final chapter, it wasn't truly the end for Jason. The franchise had a way of resurrecting him, sometimes literally. But that's a story for another part of our deep dive.
Oh, you've definitely left me wanting more. I can't wait to hear about Jason's return from the grave and how he became that supernatural force that we know today. But for now, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll delve deeper into the men behind the mask and the actors who brought Jason Voorhees to life on screen. Stay tuned.
We left off talking about Jason's transformation into that imposing figure he is today. But what's fascinating is that the man who created Jason, Victor Miller, the screenwriter of the original Friday the 13th, he had a very different vision for the character.
Really? This is news to me. What was Miller's original concept for Jason?
Believe it or not, Miller envisioned Jason as like a normal-looking child. In his script, Jason was meant to be a tragic victim of circumstance. A mentally disabled boy who drowned, due to negligence. It was the film's director, Sean S. Cunningham, and the special effects artist, Tom Savini, who made the decision to make Jason deformed.
It's a pretty significant departure from the script. Why did they decide to go in that direction?
Savini, the master of horror effects, he believed that a deformed Jason, would be more psychologically disturbing, especially for that final jump scare. Since the scene was meant to be Alice's nightmare, it gave them more creative license to craft something truly unsettling.
And unsettling it was. That image of young Jason bursting from the lake is one of the most, iconic horror moments ever. But I can't help but wonder how Victor Miller felt about his character, being changed so drastically.
From what I've read, Miller wasn't exactly thrilled about the sequels turning Jason into the main villain. He felt that the focus, should have remained on Pamela Voorhees and her grief-fueled rampage. He saw Jason as a victim, not a monster.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective. It makes you think about how a character can take on a life of its own, sometimes diverging quite a bit from the creator's original intention.
It's a great example of how, horror as a genre often taps into our collective fears and anxieties, reshaping and reinterpreting characters, stories to reflect the changing times.
We've talked about the transformation of Jason's appearance. over the course of the franchise. But what about the men behind the mask? How did the various actors who played Jason contribute to the character's evolution?
Well, because Jason is, primarily a silent character. The actors, they had to rely on, like, physicality and presence to convey, his menace. Each actor brought their own unique style and interpretation to the role.
Any particularly memorable performances or interesting stories from the actors who took on the role of Jason?
Absolutely. Warrington Gillette, who played Jason in Part 2, actually found the role kind of amusing and saw it as like a fun way to, break into the film industry.
Oh, wow.
On the other hand, Ted White, who played Jason in Part 4, he took a much more method approach. He, delved into the Jason psychology, refusing to even talk to his fellow actors on set.
Wow. That's commitment. Sounds like he really wanted to embody the isolation and rage of the character.
But if we're talking about, truly embodying the spirit of Jason Voorhees, one actor stands out, Kane Hodder.
Oh, yeah.
He played Jason in 4 consecutive films, from The New Blood to Jason X, and he's widely regarded as, the best Jason by fans and critics alike.
What was it about Hodder's performance that resonated so strongly with, fans?
Hodder understood the character on a deeper level. He recognized the pain and rage that fueled, Jason's actions. He brought a level of intensity and physicality to the role that was unmatched. There's even a story about Hodder, refusing to kick a dog in one scene because he felt it was, something Jason wouldn't do. It shows how much thought he put into understanding the character's motivations.
That's incredible. It's almost like he saw a glimmer of, humanity in this seemingly monstrous figure.
And that's what makes Jason, such a compelling character. On the surface, he's a brutal killing machine, but there's a, depth to him, a tragic element that stems from his troubled past.
So beneath the mask, the brutality, is there a sense that Jason is also a victim?
That's, one of the big questions the franchise raises. We know he was bullied as a child, ostracized because of his appearance. And then there's the, the drowning incident that sets the whole story in motion. Was his death truly an accident, or was there, something more sinister at play?
The films seem to be, a bit ambiguous on that point, don't they?
They do. And that ambiguity, it adds to the mystique of Jason Voorhees. Is he a vengeful spirit back from the dead to punish those he blames for his mother's death? Or is he, a deeply disturbed human, driven by the trauma of his own near-death experience?
So the question of whether Jason is driven by, supernatural forces or purely psychological torment is left up to the viewer to decide.
Exactly. And that's part of what makes him so terrifying. We can't easily categorize him, pin him down. He exists in this, liminal space between the human and the monstrous, blurring the lines between victim and villain.
It's that duality, that complexity that makes Jason such an enduring horror icon. He represents our deepest fears, but he also compels us to question the nature of evil itself. What creates a monster? Is it fate, circumstance, or something more primal lurking within us all?
Those are some powerful questions, and ones that the Friday the 13th franchise continues to, explore even decades after Jason first emerged from the depths of Camp Crystal Lake.
Speaking of those murky depths, we can't talk about Jason without discussing the unmasking scenes. They've become, such a staple of the franchise, like a ritualistic unveiling of the monster's true face.
Those scenes tap into, a primal fear, the fear of the unknown, the desire to confront the face of evil, even though it's a sight that, might scar us forever.
And how has the look of unmasked Jason evolved throughout the series? Has it been consistent, or have they played with his appearance over time?
They've definitely played with it. In some films, like Part 2, his face is kept mostly in shadow, adding to the mystery and suspense. In others, we get a full gruesome reveal.
Can you give us some examples of those more memorable unmasking scenes? I'm curious to hear how they've approached those moments of revelation.
Well, one of the most impactful unmaskings is in Part 4, when Tommy Jarvis, a young boy, who would become Jason's nemesis, manages to trick Jason, allowing his sister Trish to knock off the mask with, Jason's own machete. It's, brilliantly executed, full of suspense, and it gives us a clear view of Jason's disfigured face.
That's a chilling image. Jason, unmasked, momentarily vulnerable. but still a force to be reckoned with. It's no wonder that scene is stuck with fans for all these years.
Yeah.
But have there been any instances where, they've subverted the audience's expectations with the, unmasking trope?
Absolutely. In Friday the 13th, Part V, A New Beginning, there's this big unmasking scene. But the person under the mask, it isn't actually Jason. It's a copycat killer named Roy Burns, who's adopted Jason's persona.
What a twist. I can imagine that divided some fans. But it's interesting that they were willing to, play with the formula, even if it meant, risking the wrath of diehard Jason fans.
It shows that the filmmakers weren't afraid to take risks, some creative risk to keep the audience guessing, and they continued to experiment with the unmasking throughout the series.
Can you give us, some other examples?
Well, in Jason Lives, we see Jason's face briefly at the beginning of the film before he, retrieves his hockey mask. It's a quick glimpse, but it sets the stage for his transformation into, a truly supernatural entity.
It's like they were giving us a taste of the horror to come, a reminder that beneath the mask lies a being that defies the laws of nature.
Precisely. And then there's Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, where Jason doesn't even, physically appear for most of the film. Instead, his essence, his evil spirit, possesses other characters. It's not until the very end that we see his true form. And it's a sight that's both terrifying and grotesque.
So even when they, subverted the traditional unmasking, they still found ways to deliver that, visceral, shocking image that fans had come to expect. It's like a promise the franchise makes. No matter what form Jason takes, you will see the face of evil.
Exactly. And they take that promise to a whole new level in Jason X, where, Jason is cryogenically frozen and accidentally thawed out centuries later.
Okay, I've heard about this one. Jason in Space. This has to be one of the, wildest entries in the franchise. How does the unmasking play into this, sci-fi horror mashup?
Well, during an autopsy in the future, we get a brief look at Jason's unfrozen face. Yeah. And it's different.
Different how? Paint me a picture of future Jason's face.
It's more mutated, almost alien looking. It doesn't really, match up with any of the previous unmasked Jasons. And it adds to the film's overall sense of, otherworldly horror. It's like even in the vastness of space, Jason can't escape his past, his disfigurement, the trauma that's shaped him into the monster he is.
So even in the future, the unmasking tradition continues. It's like a ritual, a way of confronting our fears, even when those fears take on increasingly outlandish forms.
It speaks to the power of Jason Voorhees as a cultural icon. He's become the symbol of unstoppable evil, a figure who embodies our anxieties about, violence, death,
and the unknown. And yet, as we've discussed, there's a depth to him, a complexity that goes beyond that, simple slasher stereotype. He's a monster, yeah. But one who's been shaped by, tragedy and loss.
He's a reminder that even the most, terrifying figures can have their origins in pain and suffering, and that the line between victim and villain is often blurred,
Wow.
A haunting truth that lingers long after the credits roll.
That's a chilling thought and a perfect note to end on as we wrap up our deep dive into Jason Voorhees and the Friday the 13th franchise. We've seen that the franchise, with its iconic killer and chilling imagery, isn't just about delivering scares. It's about exploring the darker corners of the human experience. It's a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that we create ourselves, both within our imaginations and in the real world.
Happy Halloween, everyone. And remember, sometimes what lies beneath the surface is far more terrifying than what we see on the outside.
Thank you for joining us for this special Haunt Narratives Halloween Week episode. Be sure to check out our other episodes for more deep dives into the world of horror. Sleep well if you can.